The quest for a functional workshop is always in motion. I need clamps and a counter to fulfill my devotion, but I must complete countless small tasks, a list so long it could bore anyone to the last, like those tiny floorboards fastened to the beams above, sitting there silently like waiting doves. No idea what they're doing there. Meanwhile, I have a shaky surface and hardware in hand to craft sturdy clamps that can firmly stand. I've also got a long-lasting blade for metal and wood, which didn't survive slicing 10 screws as it should. It'll go well with that little bird's nest clinging to the ceiling. I won't be revealing who told me about perfect house maintenance. Before anything else, electrical outlets are needed. The workshop has only one. I had already redone the panel to plug in my 3-phase machines, but it's an opportunity to go around the room, a place a dozen outlet. I'm definitely not an electrician, but it seems to be working correctly. We'll see if I set my house on fire one day. It's time to cut the boards. I start by measuring them, then I cut them roughly to length with the panel saws, and I put them to the right width, so they're all roughly calibrated. I don't need them to be perfect for them to function, but it will be prettier. Then I plane them. This is a classic routine, jointing the concave face until it's clean, and start again on a face at 90 degrees until the wood is straightened with ease. I then switch the machine to thicknesser mode, set the planer's depth ready to unload. I calibrate the height, then the thickness of my boards. Softwoods aren't the toughest, nor the most stable, but the scent is divine as the shavings pile up. When the machine swallows the wood and spits out chips like that, I feel like I'm chewing a pine-flavoured pastille. Once this step is complete, I have my 10 perfectly squared pieces. It's time to pass them through the saw again to give them their final length. I then mark the wood at regular intervals to prepare for drilling the holes. A small jig for the drill will allow me to go much faster without any disaster. I need to adjust it on the drill press so that the holes are drilled at the same distance from the edge. I don't forget to add a pipe to collect the chips to avoid having them fly everywhere. Once all the holes are drilled, comes the time to prepare the router, to chamfer them. Be careful to tighten the collet enough so that the bit does not detach, and adjust it precisely to remove only a few millimeters. Placing a chamfer on each of the holes is a bit long, but it will be much easier to screw in. After that, I change the bit to take one with a quarter round and round off 120 edges. All the 12 edges of all the 10 clamps. Once the rounding is finished, comes the time for my favourite moment, sanding, and I do my best to clean the boards. Once the sanding is done, I prepare the hardener to reinforce the wood. When working with softwoods, it's always better to put on a little to prevent them from getting damaged too quickly. I conscientiously pass over the first face, then on the opposite face. This grain filler dries so fast that I barely finished the last clamp before the first one is already dry. A little burnishing with some wood shavings makes the grain perfectly smooth. Then comes the time to apply a clear wax. It makes the wood shinier, more resistant, but above all, the glue adheres very badly, which is very practical. I love the almost instant drying time. I can finally screw on the hardware. It's a relatively simple operation, but a bit repetitive. It's always a pleasure to see things come to life before my eyes. There is always a moment in a project where it takes enough shape for the final result to become apparent. It provides a certain sense of accomplishment, difficult to reproduce, And then there is the joy of saving. All in all, they are also very inexpensive. 10 clamps of this size is quickly a sum. I probably saved 80% by making them myself instead of buying them on a shelf. The clamps are finally ready to be used and abused. I can already imagine all the panels I'll be able to glue thanks to them. I may need to add small shims to stabilize them, but they are already perfectly functional. It's time to take care of this little table. I start by cutting a sheet of laminated plywood. The panel saw really makes this operation simple. It is obviously possible to do this with a rail and a track saw, but it's still a lot of setup, and I'm glad to take advantage of this saw, even if I'm not going to keep it for long, since a slightly larger model will replace it. I have straight cuts, pieces of a well-defined dimensions, and 4 perfectly right angles with no effort, for large pieces as well as for smaller ones. Once everything is cut, I drill the holes in the table structure to fix the plates. Mild steel drills well. I have less success chamfering the holes. It's very rough, but hey, it won't be too visible. Assembly by screwing is rather fast. And there you have it. Whee! A sturdy mobile table. I put my welding gear on it, and everything is ready and steady. Well, I know it's still very insufficient. So my next task is determined. I need a real work surface for woodworking.